welcome back. Well, it's now 100 days since Russia started its invasion of Ukraine. And while many people were expecting some kind of quick attack, some kind of quick action, instead it now appears this could be, well, a long war perhaps of attrition. At the same time, it does seem as if Russia is making progress, slowly able to take territory from Ukraine, even though there is, of course, a huge cost in lives and material and people whose lives will never be the same again. Professor Abel Esterhuyse is an associate professor of military strategy at the Faculty of Military Science at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor, good afternoon to you, and thank you for your time. How would you assess the situation on the moment in Ukraine? What kind of picture are we looking at?
Well, I think we are really at a balancing situation where it can go either way. I think Russia have really set itself up in a situation where it took control and where it's trying to do it the Russian way. And I think the Russians have been good in doing precisely that. At the same time, there's still a lot of potential in what the Ukrainians can do, and especially with the new weapons that they're receiving. So we're really at a point where the war at this stage can really go into a number of ways.
One of the ways to assess, if you try and assess what is happening, you sometimes start off with what did Russia want to happen and what actually happened. So if you think that Russia wanted a quick strike and didn't get one, you would think Russia's doing badly. But if your starting point is that Russia did never believe there was going to be a quick strike, but actually a slow war of attrition, well, then it's going according to Russia's plan. I make this point to sort of ask the question, on the ground, is Russia actually winning?
Well, I don't think so. I think Russia kicked off the whole war on the wrong and with the wrong assumptions. The assumptions they have based the whole operation on was, I think, the same kind of assumptions that Hitler started the war with Russia in 41, to be precise. At the moment, I think Russia have really adjust, and they have really started doing what we've always seen the Russians do, and that is to focus on what we refer to as mass warfare, attritionist warfare, and focusing on the artillery as their main arm. I think they have perhaps now in a position, they've put themselves in a position where they are to take small steps forward in achieving their objectives.
To many people, to me, this looks like a 20th century war, the kind of war that, clearly I was wrong, but I thought we wouldn't really see happening again because the world has changed. Is this 20th century kind of warfare still effective?
Well, it's an interesting question. The underlying question is whether, we've sort of assumed that major war between states may be something of the past. And what we've seen in the last 100 days is precisely the opposite, that major war between states is not something of the past. And if we work on that assumption that it's not something of the past, we may then ask the question, okay, so what are we going to see in future on battlefields such as this? And I think what we have seen between Russia and the Ukraine perhaps is something of the old and something of the new. We have seen what Russia have done wrong by not approaching this in a combined armed fashion. They have really exposed their tank forces by not supporting them with infantry and artillery at the beginning phases of the war, and they've paid a heavy price for that. At the same time, we have seen the Ukraine coming forward with some new approaches, using drones, using precision strike, using some new really high technology weapons. But at the same time, they have not been strategically that successful either. So I think this war is going to keep the staff colleges and military analysts quite busy in the next couple of years.
There's also a sense of total war around this. And by what I mean, you and I have been discussing what's been happening on the ground, actually militarily. But there's also the economic war, which has been the West imposing possibly the toughest set of sanctions on any country, certainly in recent times. That's one thing. But then, in response, Russia has what I would call the weapon of food. Food prices in South Africa are going up, partially as a response to Russia's blockade of Ukrainian ports.
Well, yeah, you know, once again, we're sitting with a sort of a dialectic type of situation in Russia, because on the one hand, Russia is doing quite well in absorbing the sanctions and what the West have tried to do with Russia and in isolating Russia economically. But at the same time, you know, Russia is really using whatever it has at the moment in its arsenal, and unfortunately, you know, control over the world's food is just one of those tools in the Russian strategic toolbox that it can use effectively at the moment. And I think, you know, Russia is doing precisely that. Of course, the other tool in the toolbox is the resources and the oil in particular that ought to flow to Western Europe. And it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks and months how, especially if we go into the winter months in Europe, how Europe is going to deal with that crisis, because I think that is a crisis waiting for Western Europe to unfold. At the moment, the food crisis is unfolding in the non-European world, in Africa and other places, but the crisis for Europe is still in the making.
People like to look at ways in which this war could end. It might be related. People talk about, you know, the question is, how does it end, is the way they put the question. Is that the wrong question? Could this be like the war in Syria, which has now gone on for a very long time?
Well, I think, you know, Russia is paying a heavy price for this war. Let there be no doubt about that. And I think the unintended consequences of this war for Russia is going to feature for quite a long time in international politics. It has reformed Europe. It has created a very long, unprotected border with Europe that in the past was sort of a neutral border, especially in the border with Finland that now have become NATO-nized, if I can use that phrase. So I think, you know, irrespective of how long the war is going to take to really reach a point of outcome, the consequences of this war is going to be with us for a very long time. Unlike the war in Syria that have been a regional war, the war in Ukraine is really a war that is to affect the whole of the world. And we're going to see the outcome of this war featuring in international politics for quite a while.
Professor Abel Esterhuyse, thank you very much indeed. Associate Professor of Strategy at the Faculty of Military Science at the University of Stellenbosch. I mean, just look at what's happening with food and fuel prices. That's the impact of Russia's invasion in Ukraine for you.